Hello, I'm Shivani. This is the Curly Bookworm. It's the end of 2017. How did that even happen? So we have to talk about best of and worst of. In this video, I'm going to be talking about all of them, cut up into a couple of videos to post. But today, I want to talk about all the books that I read this year that I have absolutely loved, and they became the best of 2017 for me. Let's start. This is in no particular order. I've tried to characterize this by different genres, and that's the best that I can do. But I will say that my top three are my top three. The rest of it is kind of not in order. So let's start with nonfiction. I read Big Magic this year, which is something that I actually didn't read, but I listened to on an audiobook, and it was the most fantastic experience ever. It was really, really, really good because Elizabeth Gilbert has the best reading voice ever. It's funny because this book sometimes gets categorized into that sort of self-help sort of genre, but it's really not. It was basically Elizabeth Gilbert's idea of what it feels like to be a creative person, the fact that you don't have to put too much pressure on yourself if you are letting out your creativity, and how that fulfills your life, and how to do that without being scared of being creative or being committed to being creative, but just enjoying the process. Elizabeth Gilbert also has a TED Talk that she's done, which I'm going to link below. You can take a look at it, where she talks about the muse and things like that, and how she feels about art and creating art and things. So I almost feel like this is sort of like a follow-up, this book, and at least I read it like that. And I really, really, truly enjoyed it. Definitely pick it up if you're in the mood for some inspiration, specifically. Next nonfiction book that I want to talk about today is this one. This is Chimamanda Adiche's book, which, you know, if you haven't heard me go on and on about before, I love this author. She's amazing. This is actually like a letter that she wrote to her cousin, which is why it's such a short book. And so this letter basically talked about what she should do to raise her daughter as a feminist, and how she could successfully do that, and what are the sort of basic rules and tenets to follow. I've always loved Chimamanda's ideas on feminism. There are 2 TED Talks that I will link here below. Please take a look at it because, oh my god. So this book is called Dear Ijewele, or A Feminist Manifesto and 15 Suggestions. I love how practical she is. I love how anecdotal she is. I love how she picks up examples and articulates what it means to be a feminist and how easy it is to be a feminist. You could give this to anybody who's younger, anybody who is older, people of both genders. It makes sense to everybody. I just love the way she strings her words together. It's just, you guys know I have a crush on this woman. So you should not be surprised that this is being featured in my top books this year. Okay, so let's do some graphic novels, shall we? So I just want to tell you beforehand that I didn't actually go into this saying, oh, I'm going to find 2 best graphic novels or 2 best fantasy novels. It just so happens. The first graphic novel that I want to talk about is this one. This is called Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too, except alien is spelled like that. This basically is the cutest book ever, you guys. It is adorable. What's really nice about this book is that it's super light-hearted, but it also deals with like really deep, meaningful questions of life, like what is the purpose of life, what happens when you die, and things like that. In the story of this book, you have an alien that is sent to Earth to kind of go and be a researcher and find out what humans are like and what they do. And he goes there and then he discovers something completely different, and it's a beautiful journey. It's really cute, so it's almost like childlike in that perspective, you know. Anyway, so definitely get your hands on this book. The next graphic novel that I want to talk about is the first graphic novel, or the first book that I read this year, which is The Inflatable Woman. So this book is about a girl who finds herself really sick. She has cancer, and she goes into this completely weird escapist denial sort of mode, and she doesn't know how to deal with it. But what's lovely about this book is that it stops being about the story, and it kind of becomes more about the drawings and the illustrations and the sketches and things like that. It's beautifully done. Look at the perspective. It's, oh my god, this woman, this book is by Rachael, is super talented. If you like art, then you just want to stare at the beauty in this book. It's freaking gorgeous. So the next couple of books that I want to talk about are in the fantasy genre. There are 3 books that I want to talk about in the fantasy genre. The first one is A Court of Mist and Fury, which is ACOMAF. I have reviewed this book. I will put a link below. Take a look. This is the second book in a series. The series is called A Court of Thorns and Roses. A Court of Thorns and Roses is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. It at least starts off as a retelling of the Beauty and the Beast. And it's an okay book. The second book, however, which is ACOMAF, was an amazing book. So amazing character development, great world building. I mean, there are all these different courts of seasons, I want to say, and I don't want to give much away, but essentially the main character is exposed to all of these different courts, or some of these different courts, and then you see this whole different imaginary world, and it's amazing. It's very well built, and I feel like maybe you want to read this on its own, because the first book is really just okay, and the third book is just, it's awful. But I thought I should mention the second book because it definitely was one of the best books that I've read in fantasy this year. The next book that I want to talk about is also from a series. It's called the Wayward Children's series. And the book that I specifically want to talk about from that series is again the second book, which is Down Among Sticks and Bones. This was so good. So the first book, Every Heart a Doorway, was really good. But the second book, which is Down Among Sticks and Bones, was fantastic. The story is based on a home, like a wayward home, where a lot of like these kids who have completely gone wayward have been sent to this home to get better. And then a lot of these kids are essentially just runaways, or they start talking gibberish according to other people, so on and so forth, and they are brought to this home to correct them and things like that. Except when they get there, they realize that everybody in that home has experienced exactly the same thing, which is they've traveled to different worlds and different universes and have come back and nobody believes them about it. What's great about the second book, which is Down Among Sticks and Bones, is that it actually takes a slice of one of their stories and delves into that and goes from the past and sort of talks about what happened to these 2 girls. And the world building on that is, oh my god, so good. I enjoyed these books so much. They're very short books, but they're so precise and they're so nice. The next book that I want to talk about is the first book in the Mistborn series by Branden Sanderson. I can't believe I haven't discovered this author up to date. Great world building again. As you can see, I basically enjoy fantasy where there is amazing world building. The Mistborn series is based in a world where everything is really gloomy. The world is in a very bad state. There's ash instead of snowflakes falling from the sky. There are mists that are constantly swirling around. It's basically a pathetic world. And there's this evil, awful man who's sort of ruling this world. And there are these people, allomancers, who can use metals to create magic and derive power from it. And yeah, it's that world. I don't want to say much more. There's basically 2 protagonists-ish. And I really enjoyed the first book in the series. I have read the second book, and I'm definitely reading the third book as well. It is now time for my top 3. This book. Oh my god, this book. It's called The Nightingale. It's by Kristin, Hanah. This is a story set in around the World War time. I love historical fiction as well, by the way, as a genre. So something from historical fiction had to make it into top books. But this book is essentially set in World War times, and it's about 2 sisters, Vienne and Isabel, who are completely different, raised completely differently, have completely different lives. Vienne has a husband, she has a daughter, she lives in a small village in France, and Isabel is basically just finishing college or school or whatever, and she's wild, and she wants to do great things. She wants to be remembered for great things. She wants to contribute to life and things like that. It's a dangerous time. It's not easy to be women or just human beings when there's a world war going on. And Vienne is so scared for her life. She's scared for her husband because her husband has left and gone to war. And she's by herself, and she gets Isabel to come and live with her, except she's intolerable and super wild and super rebellious, and she doesn't like her to stay there either. So Isabel goes on her own journey, and the sisters cross paths many times. So the relationship that the sisters have is really, really, really beautiful. I have a sister as well, so every time I read about sisters, I get really emotional and really attached to the story because my sister is kind of my best friend. And so I'm so curious to learn about stories in which there are sisters, and this is one of those beautiful books with a great backdrop of the war and France. Love this book. Can't wait to read more from this author. Next book that I want to talk about is Gods of Tango. Amazing book. Again, historical fiction. So this book is essentially based on Leda, who moves from Italy to Argentina because she's getting married and her husband lives in Argentina. And so she moves, she takes the ship, goes to Argentina, gets to Buenos Aires, and then realizes that her husband is dead, which is, you know, tragic and also very scary because she's now alone in a country where she doesn't speak the language, she doesn't understand anything, she doesn't know anybody, she doesn't get the culture. And so she kind of stays in the boarding house that her husband used to stay in, and the community there helps her out. What also happens parallelly is that it turns out that Leda really likes playing the violin, and she starts playing the tango. What I loved about this book is that apart from the historical backdrop of the early 1900s, Leda is essentially trying to navigate herself into this world that is completely new, try to figure out her identity as a musician, her identity as a woman, how that sort of interplays together. Also because this is a time when you cannot be a musician if you're a woman, because it's just shameful and disgraceful and all those things. So this book has such beautiful themes of gender, of identity, of, you know, career, of romance, of just the backdrop of what it may have been like culturally at that point, and so on and so forth. Loved this book, loved it, and I totally urge you to go and read it because it's such a good book. The next book, which is my top book of the year, is this book. You have heard me rave about this book forever and forever. I also have a review for this book, which I will put up in the link below. Please take a look at it if you're interested in a longer review. This is about a girl called Juliet who lives in the Bronx. She's Puerto Rican. She lives with her family in a sort of close-knit house, and she's supposed to go to Portland for an internship for the summer. And just before she does, she breaks the news to her family that she's a lesbian. And this basically, as you can imagine, completely shakes up the conventional Catholic Puerto Rican family, and they're just like, some of them laugh it off, thinking that she's joking, and some of them are just really hurt, like her mother. But she takes that flight anyway, goes to Portland, and she's working for this woman who has written a book about feminism, and she's interning with her, and that woman's completely eccentric, and she has this crazy life with like lovers and poetry and all kinds of things, and she discovers what it may be like to be outside of her comfort zone and outside of like a place that she's always grown up in, and just the whole thing is such an adventure. This book, great book, definitely read it. So that was a list of my top 10 amazing books that I read this year. If you've read any of these books, please let me know in the comments below, because I definitely want to discuss all of these books. I have so much to say about them. I love them. And if you haven't, then I urge you to go and read them and then come back and tell me what you thought about it. So I gotta go, but before that, share this video, like this video, send me all those lovely comments because I like talking to you in the comments. Happy New Year, and I will see you next year. Sounds so great to say every time.